Scott Doyne. Welcome to the Sports Management Podcast.
Thanks, Marcus. Great to be with you.
Great to have you on the show. You're a former media executive at Turner Sports, certified career coach, most recently an author. We will talk a lot about that, but also an educator, mentor, working across sports, media, and tech. So a lot of experience there.
I've had a lot of time. It's in the gray hair.
Sounds good. So, yes, when we were talking approximately a week ago, you launched your book titled Navigating the Quarter Life Career Crisis. So, can you tell us a little bit about why you wrote this book and what it's about?
I'm a parent, first of all, of two college-age children. I'm also a teacher at Emory University in career navigation. So my students are in that age group. I've been a mentor and a manager of young professionals for a long time. So I've just noticed a change in the last, let's say, 5 years that this generation is feeling an immense amount of stress related to career decision making. And so I wanted to understand it better, see what it is behind that, validate it, and if it were true, find some possible solutions that that group has been looking for. So that's really why I went after it, and I just really want to share those insights with as many people as want to help out as possible.
That's fantastic. And of course, we will not spoil the book here, but there are a lot of young people now entering the industry, and I feel like, and I'm partly guilty as well, but the Gen Z and the younger generation doesn't get a bad rap sometimes of not, being lazy and not being, going the extra mile in the workforce and so forth. Do you share this view? And also, what are some challenges that you see that the new generation have in their career life?
I don't share the view. I think generational disdain is a tradition. And so whether it's Gen X versus Gen Z or the baby boomers versus Gen X or millennials, I don't think it's anything really new. And so there are always things that we don't understand about each other. And whether that's at a generational level or human to human at any age, it takes effort. And so I'd advise, and the way I tried to manage was people as individuals understand what it is they want to accomplish, understand that motivation, and try to align that with the organization's goals. And so I don't have that same opinion. Everybody's an individual, and while there might be some people that aren't as proactive, and if that's what's being seen, um, that might be somebody that you don't want to hire. But once you've hired somebody, you've made that decision, that's an investment in their future. And it will take effort to get the most out of them and hopefully let them get the most out of you.
Yeah. So what are some challenges that you see for young people in the industry right now to getting a job?
Yeah, it really is difficult. And I think some things are sort of industry agnostic or even economically agnostic, like the difficult job market, the effects of AI and what that's doing. But it is exacerbated at this age group. For the first time ever, at least in the US, the unemployment rate for recent grads is worse than the overall population. Um, and in addition to that, I'd say the thing that I found from them that stresses them out the most is social media. And while all of us are on social media, or most of us are on social media, and we sort of understand the fact that everything that people are publishing isn't necessarily their true selves or certainly their weaknesses or vulnerabilities, the younger generation has grown up as virtual and social first. And so that is their foundation of understanding human capacity and even the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic when this group was in their teenage years. It hit them at a very important time in their brain, mental, development. And so one of the interviewees quoted, "Comparison is the thief of joy." And I think that really gets to the bottom of not just the struggles with the industry, but the internal struggles with what they perceive is around them and trying to keep up with people and stay on an expected timeline. All of those things, I think, make it difficult mentally to just sort of process what's going on and find a way forward.
Hmm. Yeah, it's so much information. Like with social media, you have access to information all the time. There's so many impressions on you and what's going on now. You mentioned COVID-19, but there's also war on several fronts in the world going on right now. And is there an environmental crisis been talking on for a long time, a financial one? It's a lot of uncertainty. So I guess that's an additional pressure on the young people as well.
Yeah, according to them, it feels that way. And world events were, I not only interviewed a couple dozen Gen Z folks, but I did a nationwide survey of 400, young folks 18 to 25. And, when I asked what it is that stresses them out overall, career stress and financial stress were the top two. And then within career stress, there's additional layers to what they shared with me.
Mm. So what are some things they can do, some advice for the young people to be successful in their work life?
First, I'll tell you what they asked for because I think that's really important when working with young folks and my children and even myself at that age was no different. Lecturing and demanding and mandating certain types of action, they'll just tune you out. And so instead, what I did was ask them what resources they would like additional access to. And the top two of those was mentoring and networking support. I think the networking support's really interesting because, as I mentioned, with the virtual and social first nature of this age group and living through the isolation of COVID-19 pandemic, they really aren't great at interacting with other human beings. It's not something that comes as natural to them. They feel socially awkward. And so you can see where networking is even more frightening than the average person, which I would say treated at best as a necessary evil. There's a lot of introverts in the world, and I think that population would self-identify, whether accurately or not. So support and networking, which they're willing to admit they need help with, I think what we can do is provide that olive branch, make it easier on them. And the tools that I provide to my young clients for networking aren't about a transactional relationship. It's about building a genuine relationship out of curiosity. I call it networking as a research project. If there's an area of the industry that you want to learn more about, ask the questions you actually want answers to. This is genuine. This maintains your authenticity and your integrity. And then you can get to know each other in a way that that person then has a chance of becoming a mentor. Or when a job or internship is posted, it's not your first time reaching out and asking them, oh, hey, can you give me a job? You've never met me before. It's the building of that over a lifetime. And so appreciating the stress involved and then bringing some networking tools to them that are more in line with how they'd like to go about it. And I think the research method is something that can be very useful.
Yeah, definitely. And it's interesting that you said that they are a bit shy and they don't know how to interact with people because a lot of networking can be done online, and LinkedIn, for example, is a perfect tool. So maybe that could be a start to get, your the first connection with someone, and then take that next step to maybe have a physical meeting or a phone call or something.
That's right. One of the beautiful things I think of writing a book like this is I forced myself back to that age. What was I thinking? How did I begin networking? How did I find my first mentor? And, me now as a 51-year-old, it's easier to forget how difficult that might have been. And so putting yourself in the shoes and realizing that there's fear and uncertainty and how uncomfortable that might be. I remember going to my first conference. I remember meeting, an NBA commissioner for the first time. I remember going to these cocktail parties at different sporting events. It makes you nervous. It still does today. And, I think that discomfort can keep you away. But also, I've seen this with some of my clients and even my kids, as you start to practice, just like any other skill, and it starts to work in some capacity, then you're emboldened, you have a little more confidence. But beginning that process, maybe with some, in baseball terms, singles and doubles, starting where it's a warm lead, starting with a friend of the family, starting with somebody who's an alumnus of your school or is from your hometown, finding those commonalities where you can just learn this practice and gain some momentum. And then I promise you, they'll be fine at that point. But getting started is the hardest part.
Definitely. But I like that what you said that maybe you know someone who knows someone to get your foot in. Like the first episode of this podcast, now we are on like 250, something along those lines. The first episode was with the father of a classmate of mine who worked in the industry. And then, then you get going, as you said, because starting is the hardest part. And then that got me started, and then you're taking it from there.
You are. And it's beautiful to watch at that point because then, if I'm coaching somebody, we move on to something else.
Mm, exactly. So you mentioned networking, but also mentorship.
Mentoring. Yeah.
Yeah. So what signifies a great mentor? What is it that these young people need?
Somebody to listen. Not everybody has somebody in their life that will listen to them objectively, without judgment, and possibly without even giving advice. Somebody just to lean on. And depending on your background and where you come from, seeing somebody that's like you or looks like you or comes from a similar place as you. I've seen that that's very, very powerful. I quote a bunch of folks in the book, and it's actually former President Barack Obama mentioned, young women growing up and seeing other professional women in the working world, that gives them a light in terms of what could be. And I think that's the same for everybody. I had a former boss who used to teach law school classes, and she's a South Asian Indian woman. And she said the amount of young women of color that would come up to her after class was so much greater than her predecessor, who was a middle-aged white guy. That I think having people in authority positions across the range of industries creates the possibility that young folks see that person. And then I interviewed a bunch of professional folks for the book as well. Once I understood, mentoring or professional networking was an area of support. There's a woman, Parul Khosla, that runs Arena Talent, which is a sports networking organization. Really awesome. It's 3 female founders. And she said, finding a mentor doesn't have to be super formal. And I think this is one of the other myths. It can be very informal. And I even traced this back to young folks in my young career. When people are applying for colleges or universities, they have to ask for references. And it might be your little league coach, it might be your teacher or professor, it might be your guidance counselor. Those are actually the beginnings of the seeds of what it's like to ask a professional for support. And so if young folks are familiar with having done that, some of those same people might be eligible mentors for you. It could be an internship boss, could be a club advisor. But again, just getting started in an informal way. Is it somebody that you can talk to once a month, once a quarter, once a year, that might be that ear that's willing to listen without judgment?
Mm. Yeah, I think that's really interesting and important, as you say, to take that with you because it is difficult to find a job if, especially in the beginning, because it's this joke or myth again, like you need to have 10 years of experience, but you just finished college. Like, how's that possible? So internships is a great one, but also, as you said, to have some references that can talk on your behalf and get you that first foot into the door.
Totally.
It's sports is a big industry, but still a small industry, I feel, at the same time. So is it you have been, been in media, you have been in different sectors, we said tech, and so if we compare sports to other industries, would you say it's more difficult to get into, less difficult, or equal to some other industries that you have experiences from?
Yeah, I do think it's more. And I see this now through my clients' lens, where yes, I do coach clients that are trying to get into the sports business or advance in the sports business, but I have clients now in the environmental sector, education, healthcare. Tech, certainly at the higher reaches of tech, I think has its similarities, but the navigation is very different. It's not so much a networking game. It's not so much a who there is, I think, a little more of a meritocracy. In sports, it's almost all relationship based. And I saw a clip of one of your past guests that said it's a supply and demand issue. And I think that's true. There is always going to be an overabundance of candidates in passion professions. That's just how it is. Even though, in the 30 years I've been in the industry's grown so much, right? It grows and grows and grows. But I think there's always supply of new, young, and whatever aged folks that want to work in an area that has passion. And that's where compensation is a factor. Your time and hours is a factor as a result. And like you've talked about with guests, breaking in is hard. So I do think sports is on the harder side of things in general.
Yeah. So then we said get yourself to, help these young people that are listening here and that will buy your book and read your book. But, so getting yourself a mentor, maybe getting some internships, getting references, anything else that they can do early on to help kickstart their career.
That's right. And the way we're setting this up, it sounds like a lot of work. This is going to create more stress. I feel way behind. And so I don't want to lose the note about the stress management because we talked about that earlier. There is the stress, there is the anxiety, there is the keeping up with the Joneses, as we say. And then there's this target that seems harder than ever. So it's like there needs to be a bridge there still, not just the mentors, not just the networking, but also tools for stress relief. And so I spent a good amount of the book finding out how young folks do relieve their stress, and then also talk to some psychologists and therapists as well, which was a door that the candidates opened too. That there is a world of stress management available. Sometimes when you're in stress mode, what somebody said was, not only is there flight and fight or flight, but it's fight, flight, or freeze. And if you're too stressed out, your brain just stops thinking and you can't take any steps forward. So that sort of paralysis is just as, makes things even more difficult that if you're not moving at all, how can you move towards one of these areas that you might like to work in? So trying to get yourself out of stress mode so that you can take some steps in some direction that you can adapt and learn and adjust later. But moving forward is really important, and it might be impossible to do that if you're too stressed out.
Yeah. Of course, it's really important to have your mental and physical well-being on point, obviously, for several reasons. Uh, I've talked many times about work-life balance, and I feel that, as you mentioned, also in sports, sometimes that is a little bit tricky because it's a mix of it's a work and it's a passion and it's a lifestyle a little bit blended, and then it's hard to find that balance for work and not work.
It is, and I'll speak from my own perspective when it comes to that first, if that's okay. My definition of balance might be different than somebody else's, but when I was enjoying my job, I really felt like that was part of the definition. If you're working at a job that you hate and you hate the people that are around you, I don't care how many hours you have to work at it, it can be miserable. But if you're working at a job that you love and you enjoy and maybe has purpose to it, the number of hours isn't really the most important factor. Yes, it might take you away from family or hobbies or friends, and that's definitely an equation everybody has to decide on for themselves. But between me, my wife, and my kids, we tried to find that balance within a space where I was really enjoying myself and hopefully providing entertainment and joy to others through sports fandom.
Mm. Yeah. So if we dig a little bit into the book and how that process is, because I don't think that everyone knows what goes into writing a book, and we mentioned it before we hit record that you released a video of a little bit your process behind it, and it was really interesting to follow, and the highs and lows and everything that go through that process. Can you talk us through how it was to writing this book?
Yeah, thank you. That it's my first vlog, and I feel silly even saying it, but yeah, I launched a TikTok account. I'm trying to reach Gen Z folks where they are. This is a YouTube playlist that's out there, and I've got sample clips on all of my platforms. But I did want to peel back the curtain on the writing and publishing process. My first book, so a year and a half ago, I published exploring the midlife career crisis. And that was about my own transformation from sports media exec to career coach. And it's got some tools for career transition that I self-published. So that was on Amazon. I self-published it, and I had a certain process for that. This second book I did in partnership with a publisher, a hybrid publisher, where we jointly invested in the process. They provided experts, development editors, cover designer, marketing and PR support. So together, that process took about a year. And so over the year, I recorded these little videos along the way to talk about, the challenges I was having, the process I was going through, how I felt going into an editing meeting or coming out of an editing meeting, or when I got a bunch of changes proposed. But then also the delight of receiving my first, paperback copy, and then the hardback copy, and then a last video on launch day in terms of how I was feeling that day. So in general, I started this process with research. That was different for this book. I felt like that was important. Like I said, I did a bunch of interviews, then I did some surveys, and that became the fabric of what I knew the book was supposed to be, which was, essentially by Gen Z for Gen Z. I was just the person that channeled all of that content into a structure that I feel like is consumable. And then I went and found those stakeholders or professionals that provided resources and solutions, some great books, some great nonprofits. And so I married those things together. So the research was first, a ton of writing over the summer. The fall was really editing. And then it was time to sort of get ready for launch. And there are, edits and adjustments all along the way. But that's essentially the process I went through.
Yeah, so from the video you got something back and it was like 600 something in the notes. Like how do you,
It was.
how do you tackle that without getting
Oh my
discouraged?
God. And what's crazy? Even now I think about it, that 600 something didn't even include the punctuation. So it was actually in the thousands if you included the punctuation and spacing and that sort of stuff. So this is why editors exist. For me, I took on a mantra during that time because we all have stuff going on in our heads and have anxiety and imposter syndrome. So my mantra was better is better. And so I wanted this book to be better than my last book. I wanted there to be more impact. And now that it's out there, I'm getting some nice feedback that, at least it's helping some people navigate, or helping parents understand what their children are going through, managers, understanding their younger employees. So this is what I wanted to happen. I have no idea at what scale that's going to happen, but I'm glad it's being well received so far.
It's happy to hear that it's being well received. So where can the listeners go and find it to buy it?
Yeah, it's in lots of stores. So Amazon for sure, Barnes and Noble. It's available in bulk purchase on Porchlight. It's in some local Atlanta bookstores, which is really cool. So the easiest way is to go to scottdoyne.com, and you can find a link to all those options, or Ripples Media's website. And then I'm always on LinkedIn, so you can find me on LinkedIn, 6 or 8 hours a day.
Awesome. Networking opportunity right there.
Absolutely, bring it on.
Awesome. So I'd like to get to know the guest a little more as well on like your career journey. So you mentioned that you were a media executive that turned your career into a certified career coach and so forth. So, taking it from the very beginning, like how did you break into the industry in the first place? And if we take it from there.
Yeah, gosh, how far back do I go? I first of all grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I went to University of Michigan for my undergrad education, and that was in sports management. So I thought or knew at the time that I might want to work in sports, and so I pursued that in college. I got involved in the student television station. My friend and I co-founded that, so we got involved on the media side at that point. I had a bunch of internships that then led me to some paying opportunities in sports TV production, what we'd call freelance production. After doing that for a while, I ended up going back to business school. And through business school at Emory University, I ended up getting an internship again. This time it was at Turner Broadcasting. It was in the CNN division. So it wasn't in sports quite yet, but I was at least in the right building. And while I was there, I did network my butt off and found as many Emory grads and MBAs as I could. That eventually led to a part-time job during my second semester of my second year of business school with NASCAR.com, which was being run by Turner Sports at the time. So this is now 2003, believe it or not. So early-ish internet for sure. And then I stuck around for 20 years. So through NASCAR.com, NBA Digital, I ran a product strategy team, and then I ran a research and analytics group across Turner Sports, Bleacher Report, and House of Highlights the last 4 years there.
Wow. So, I mean, these transitions going from, different, both within sport but also outside, how have those transitions been like for you?
Lucky. I'll just start there. I feel very, very fortunate. I'm not sure how much I realized that at the time, but certainly looking back on it, I'm so happy with my career. I got to work with a lot of great people, not just in my company, but the league partnerships. A lot of that was like iron sharpen iron. Working with NASCAR, working with the NBA, working alongside our teams that did our first U.S. soccer deal or Champions League. Getting to know all those people, it was just a phenomenal environment. And getting into digital media that early and riding that sports wave, I'm not sure I had a ton to do with all of that success, but I enjoyed the time I had, and hopefully I contributed something.
I'm sure you did. And having a long career in the sports industry and outside, as mentioned, has there been any bumps on the road in your career? And if so, how did you overcome them?
Oh yeah, so many bumps. I've got a chapter on failure, and I'm not going to give away the first two words of that chapter because they might be my favorite two words of the whole book. But I think we have to get comfortable with failure. We have to get comfortable with taking risks and realize that it's not the end of the world. At the time, it might feel that way, and I would never try to convince somebody otherwise. It feels like crap when stuff falls apart. Being on the leading edge of digital media, is very close to the bleeding edge. And we had leaders that loved innovation, whether it was David Levy and Lenny Daniels in Turner Sports, or the sports commissioners, Adam Silver in particular. They always wanted us pushing forward. And so as a result, you break some eggs. And so it could be the back end of our commerce system breaking the first day on the Daytona 500. It could be product failures where we thought we were ahead of the curve, and it turns out we were too far ahead of the curve. I remember a downloads business like that. Having products on Blackberries. If people remember, that stage, we launched 100 apps for NBA League and team properties across BlackBerry, Android, and iPhone in the mid 2000s. So there were plenty of things that failed, but we were always encouraged to keep trying. Probably have some scars from it, but I was really happy to work for leaders that understood that sometimes stuff's not going to work, and you weren't punished for it. Thank goodness.
Yeah, that's really important that you have that security that that you're pushing for excellence and you're pushing to get better. But if you mess up, that you're not getting, punished for that for sure, because then you will not dare to push the limits.
That's right. And who wants a staff that's not trying to do new things when you're in a part of the industry that everything is new? Social media is new, mobile is new, applications, live streaming video, trying to keep up with the pace of new technology from all the different sports leagues. So, we're in sports, so it's competitive. Like that's just sort of the nature of it is some of our golf properties, we would watch what the Masters did and then try to outdo them for the PGA Championship. And, sometimes we actually partnered with some of the other broadcasters. And I think that's some of our best work, like March Madness, partnering with CBS and Turner Sports. That was very innovative at the time to be able to watch any game that you want at any time through digital platforms. So continuing to push the envelope was super important. And sometimes that cut across who you partner with that might have been a competitor. But if you can do more for the fan together, I think that's the right answer sometimes too.
Definitely, and that it's great to be able to do that partnership, but also I think competition is really important and healthy as well in that industry to push the limits because if there is a monopoly on something, you really have no need to improve. But if you have someone who's chasing you and you said, you're in sports, it's competitive, you want to be better, then that's gonna increase the quality from your work as well.
Exactly. And I look at where a lot of those people are now that were leading us. And, one of my old bosses, Matt Hong, is now leading Versant Sports. And so, those lessons, but also those relationships carry on to new and different places in the industry. And I love seeing that happen.
Yeah, me too. Uh, a lot of you have mentioned a lot of very experienced sports professionals, Adam Silver and so forth, that you have worked with or around for and so on. So, what are some? Can you point to some learnings that you have taken from any of these individuals?
Oh, that is a really good question, Marcus. I really was surrounded by so many great leaders. Um, I'll mention one who was my boss on NBA Digital. Her name was Christina Miller, still is Christina Miller. And she had worked at Cartoon Network, and then took over a large part of the sports business within Turner Sports. And I think that was a really important lesson that we can expand, we can extend, we can leverage strengths from one part of the organization to another. So when I ended up taking on the research and analytics function, for me, that was not how I grew up. I partnered with analytics teams and I knew the value of it because I was running digital products and businesses. But taking over a team where you didn't know as much as them, I think, seeing Christina go through that, learn as much as she could, but also trust her team to be more expert at certain things than she was. There's a certain humility that comes with leadership that I think is important where, if all you do is hire people that know less than you have no chance at growth. And so I think, when it comes to hiring the right people, motivating them, going back to what we were talking about with Gen Z, letting them be the innovators. They're closer to the target demographic anyways of what we're trying to do. And so I think learning from leaders like that there's an element of humility to growth.
Definitely, and it also says a lot about that person that you're trusting yourself and what you know and don't know, and that you're able to trust your team. Um, it speaks to security and maturity as well, I would say.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive if you're younger and again, if you're just exposed to archetypes online of what leadership looks like, you might get the wrong idea. And so living and having mentors like that in your life and your career, you can eventually find a blueprint that feels right for you. And it's impossible to explain this when you're 20, but by the time you're in your 30s or 40s or this age, being yourself is much more comfortable and just sort of doing things the way that you feel is right. It probably took me 15 years of my career to get to that point where I could identify with a certain leader. It's like, oh, I can actually be myself. And I was at my best at that point.
Yeah. I think that's an important lesson to learn because if you're pretending to be someone that you're not and you're getting praised for that, then you will still have that insecurity that that's not actually who you are. So,
Yeah.
just
I think
easier said than done, but
it is. And, I'll admit there were times where I put on a different coat of armor or pretended to be somebody else, and I was terrible at it. I am not bad cop. I am good cop. And, I'll shout out another manager, Laura Dames, who really helped me see that truth. Stop trying to pretend to be this shark in the water just because you're surrounded by sharks. You can still be, in my case, the dolphin.
I love that. I love that. And you mentioned it before with technology and AI, and maybe that can be a stressor for young people as well, because will this type of job be available in the future? Will this take my current job, and so forth? So where do you see, AI going in the industry and in general with technology in the sports industry?
It's really a whole nother level of change from my standpoint. Again, I saw the earliest days of the internet and mobile and social media, and those things drastically change the foundation of sports and all industries. AI, from my standpoint at this point, is even more transformational. So, in what directions? I don't really know. I'm a career coach now. I don't have to worry as much about it, but I am augmenting my human skills as a career coach with AI tools that exist. So it's this sort of hybrid approach to things. It's also a continuous learning and adaptability. And so, in terms of the skills that I think are most important for young people, adaptability and resilience are at the top of the list for me. It's not a particular functional skill, although I do believe communication, creativity, influence. I think those things will last the test of time a little longer. But if there are going to be more AI related roles, I don't think it has to be a defeatist approach. I think it's, learn as fast as you can, learn as much as you can, see how you can apply it, get a little uncomfortable. And then I have always looked to the younger people to harness the power of new technologies. So as young people enter the industry, they're not as burdened with how things used to be done that I know as you get older, sometimes it's hard to retrain. Sometimes it's not. And I give full credit to everybody for the ability to learn new things. But I actually think the young folks have an advantage in not knowing how things used to be done. And so they can grow up, call it AI first, develop and harness those tools for the betterment of the fans, your organization, and the industry.
Definitely. And I think that there most probably will be some jobs that will, disappear because of AI. Maybe like, I don't know, copywriting or something like that. But that AI will also create new jobs. And I mean, that's the same with the internet and with the industrialization. And like there has been these type of things before. It's just that some,
It's so true.
yeah. So some roles will disappear, but new will appear.
And some of that's always been true. I could have never said when I got to University of Michigan that I wanted to run NBA.com because it didn't exist. And that's going to be true in the future. And so, as long as you're trying new things and you're learning, you're applying them and showing evidence of your impact, I think you'll be okay. But, again, that means you have to acknowledge your fear of what's happening, not compartmentalize it, but accept the fact that it's a challenge, and then find your way through that in a way that's comfortable for you.
Definitely. I love that. I like to end on a networking question. We have talked a lot about it. So, who is someone from your network that you think would be a good guest on my show?
Oh my gosh. In the world of sports, if you have not had Pete Scott on yet,
No.
Pete is like the mayor of global sports to me. We worked together for a long time. He is always on to the next thing, whether it was fantasy sports or sports gambling or live streaming or now, or blockchain or whatever's next, AI. He's always there before everybody else. And I've always respected him for that.
I love that. That's a great name. Pete Scott. Do that for
Hmm.
sure.
Hmm.
Scott Doyne, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, and I hope everyone, buys your book and reads it. I will do that for sure, and best of luck in the future.
Thanks, Marcus. Have a great day.
You too.